call the meeting to order. We're the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee meeting on December 15th at 6:05 p.m. I apologize, I don't have the agenda open because I was busy. And Rebecca, are we streaming now?
Yes, we're streaming because that's the way we noted this meeting.
Okay, yeah. You probably all got the note from Rebecca that the board didn't specifically direct last night, but moving forward, we may not do live streaming of all committee meetings. I wouldn't say I'm in favor of not doing that, but it's not a requirement that we ever did it. It's just a board policy that we can. So in the future, we may or may not actually stream all meetings, but we are right now. So I would, I guess I'll go and do the roll call for everybody. That's absolutely a good use of time. I'll start with Tim Shell. You here?
I'm here.
All right. Monique Mobley.
Present.
Gina Pagel.
Here.
Allison Voller.
Here.
Michelle Berg.
Here.
Audrey Deppen.
Here.
Bethany Pottinger.
Here.
Brian Hafer.
Here.
Kathy Kittle.
Here.
Christy Scheppelman.
Here.
Diane Rusk.
Here.
Emily Meyer.
Present.
Isabel Moore.
Here.
Laura Ostrander.
Here.
Leslie Petty.
Here.
Melanie Meister.
Here.
Is it Meester? I mess it up every time.
No, you got it right this time. It's Meister.
I'll do it wrong next time. Melissa Hernandez.
Here.
Nia Vang.
Here.
Paul Whitley.
Here.
Pam Potter.
Here.
Sam Kaufman.
Here.
Katie Grendall.
Here.
And last but certainly not least, my co-host, Joel Lewis.
Here.
You should all have seen, I believe, the minutes from the last meeting. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes drafted by Rebecca from the last meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second it.
Okay, so motion by Brian and seconded by Joel. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Great. Obviously, you all have the agenda for today. Does anyone have any clarifications or questions about it or any modifications at all? But if there are none, I would request a motion to approve the agenda as written.
I'll move.
Okay, Sam?
Second, Monique.
All right, thanks, Monique. All in favor or any discussion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. All right, next agenda item is Roman numeral V, the NEA equity audit. The purpose of this item is to begin the process of completing the audit. Facilitators for this session, Katie, Melanie, Gina, and Allison. So whoever would like to go ahead and start, take it away.
I don't think we talked about who was going to screen share.
Before you got here, Allison and I talked briefly. I'll do it. So I'm just pulling it up. And I think I have arranged it so you don't see my entire life. All right. You would be appalled at how many tabs are open in other windows. So we look forward to beginning this process tonight. And you do have access to the slides in the email from Rebecca if you'd prefer to follow along in that way. But tonight we're going to take a bit of time to prepare, and then we'll take our first step with the first little piece of the audit itself. So before we do that, we thought it would be important just to prepare for this discussion by reviewing the norms that we have agreed to. It's been tricky at times to keep all of these in mind. So just as a reminder, these are the norms that we have agreed to. We're really going to strive to achieve equity of voice today. Specifically, we're all already on mute, and if you're comfortable, your video is on. The raising of hands has been tricky, and so we'll remind people and encourage people to do that tonight, whether it's your Zoom hand or your real hand. We'll try to keep an eye on all the participants. We'll try to focus on explaining any acronyms or any terminology, and we just ask that if there's something that is unfamiliar to you, please speak up so that we can address that. And then the rest are more about respect, and we will focus on those courageous conversation norms that you see below. So be engaged, speak your truth, listen for understanding, be open to experiencing discomfort and accepting non-closure, especially today because we're just getting started with this. Withholding judgment and remembering to say just enough. All right. So these are the 7 criteria that are a part of the NEA opportunity audit, and we will refer to the framework that is called the Great Public Schools framework, and this is also in our shared drive. If you ever feel like you need the long version, you can refer to it there. So I'll just give a brief preview of where we're headed. We are just starting with number 1 today. So if this seems like it is overwhelming, that's why we've chosen to go the route of taking it bit by bit. But we also want people to realize where we're headed so that it's not frustrating if you feel what we're focusing on tonight isn't what you consider to be the most important of our work. So the 7 areas that are critical to success of our public schools are school readiness, and that's where we'll begin today. That focuses not only on students being prepared each day to be at school and ready to learn, but it specifically focuses on preschool and early elementary education and how that sets students up for readiness for the rest of their school experience. The second is standards and curriculum. So we've heard a little bit about our partnership with Nehemiah, but we'll take a wider scope view of standards and curriculum in the district. The third will be conditions of teaching and learning. The fourth, workforce quality. So having staff that are qualified, caring, diverse. And we've talked about that in our charge as well. Accountability and assessments is another area of focus. And then family and community engagement, which we hope to have great discussion about. That's where lots of discussion that we've already had has kind of centered around. So we'll look forward to that discussion. And then finally, school funding. And these criteria really align well with what the group was charged with. So we feel that if we review these areas, we will then be better prepared to come forward with some recommendations to the school board. Are there any questions quickly before I go on? And I can't see well, so if someone else can monitor if anybody's raising a hand.
You're good to go. I don't see any, Gina.
Okay, thanks. So just as a preview, the first of the criteria that we will take a look at tonight is criteria 1. Makes sense, we're going in order. Schools exemplify readiness for all students and educators. So we'll talk more specifically about this coming up, but I just wanted to highlight kind of the format of the audit. So you'll notice that there are the different elements down the side, and then we will talk about how we will rank them across the top. So this is just the beginning, and if, again, you look at this and think this doesn't really get to the meat of it, there are 31 sub-criteria of these that we can take a closer look at if we do identify areas of concern. So again, this tool was picked because of its depth, and we hope that it is helpful because of that. And then on the following slide, Allison will go more into this, but you saw on this one that we'll be using these ranking items here. So, Allison, take it away.
Okay, thank you. So we are going to shortly share a Google form where we are going to look at the different parts of criteria 1 and ask you to essentially vote on your understanding of if they exist in our district or not. So this is the criteria that will be used, or the language that will be used for each element within criteria 1. So we just wanted to go over and clarify kind of what these different parts mean. So NA is exactly what it means. The element doesn't apply to the school district. So for example, tonight we're going to be looking at some elements that ask specifically about like 4K programming. So if even though we have a 4K program as a part of our district, if we did not, then that would be a situation where you would do NA. This next two does not exist and not apparent. As I was going over this information for tonight, when I look at those descriptors, to me, they're very similar. And I had a different meeting with Katie this afternoon, and we were talking through it as well. So I guess that does not exist and not apparent means it's not in our district. When we're looking at the element, it would not be there. So I guess we're looking for feedback from the group if we are comfortable just marking one or the other, and if so, if it's okay just to go with one of them. And I guess I'll pause right here to see if anyone has a strong feeling one way or the other about that.
I guess I would add that my understanding would be that because we're all marking it individually, if we know that it doesn't exist, we would mark does not exist. But if we don't know that it exists, but it doesn't seem to because we've never heard anything about it, it's not been a part of our experience, then we would mark not apparent. So I don't know if that's a helpful distinction, but that's how I took them.
Okay. Nope, that is good. So we will, in the way we have it set up, we have them both there. So if we can go with that. So if you know for sure it does not exist, you can do does not exist, and not apparent would be if you are not sure if it's there or not. And
Okay.
it looks like, Pam, do you have a question that you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I couldn't figure out how to.
No, the way
do
you
this
said
busy
it's
thing when
perfect.
the screen is being shared. I looked at all of the questions that were in the PDF that we got prior to the meeting, and I just feel a little bit out in the cold as far as some of these questions are concerned, because I don't know what the current policies are. I don't know what the funding levels are. I feel that not being, working actively in the school district, I'm going to skew the whole audit because I'm just not really, I just don't feel like I have enough information to answer any of these questions intelligently.
So, and anybody else can chime into that, help prepare for this. So we are, as Gina said, we're starting with criteria 1, and I believe it's the next slide or in a couple slides. Before we actually do any of the voting essentially on the criteria, we have prepared data that would help to clarify any of the terms within the different elements, and then leaving it open for discussion if people need further clarification. But the group that is preparing for this has contacted different people in the district to try to prepare as much information as we can to just share the facts of what is applicable to the different elements. And
Pam, we hear you, and we'll definitely take that into consideration. We felt that way at times as well, and that's why we structured it in a way that we'll do some data seeking prior to each criteria so that we have information to share. And we still feel like the perspective from people who are outside of the working in the school district or attending school in the school district is really valuable, because if people are unaware of how things are, we might not be, you know, meeting those needs. So that's valuable as well.
okay. And I'll just finish talking through these different points here. With emerging, so it would mean the element exists as written policy, but is not sufficiently implemented or carried out in the school district. Improving shows that it is there, that the element is in compliance. And then flourishing would mean that it's, I think of that as like above and beyond. It's evident, but plus there's added pieces of innovation and inclusiveness in the school improvement pieces. So
I have my hand up. It's Monique. I think adding on to what Pam was talking about, I think we also need to take the big picture when we're answering this and thinking about our experience within the school district as a whole through the years, and not thinking during this COVID pandemic teaching time, because some things are just a little bit different right now. So I think when I'm going to be answering questions, I'm going to be thinking, you know, not just what's happening specifically during this academic year, but, you know, what we've been doing in the past and what things are coming forward. So that's just to add on a little bit to what Pam was commenting on.
Thank you, Monique. Yes, that's very important.
And Leslie, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So I do agree with answering these questions and not being fully informed. And I am afraid that I might be answering these questions and be completely off pace of what the answer should be. And also, are these questions meant for an external group outside of the educational environment? Is
Yes.
it sounds like there's a certain body of knowledge within the school district or within the school community that would be better served to be able to answer some of these questions, and perhaps that's just not the case. I don't know, but I'm getting that impression from what I'm seeing and what I've read.
So I can speak to the paperwork that goes with this recommends that it is made up of the people who serve on this committee. So that's why we chose to not do it separate from the committee, but just do it within the committee. So it specifically recommends having parents and community members and teachers and students and administrators, and that's who we are. So we can certainly reevaluate, after we get through this evening's little part, and see as we look forward if this is the model that we want to continue with.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add into at the end, after we do the discussion and the voting with criteria 1, we do have like an exit slip where we are going to be taking your feedback of how tonight felt, how this process felt, and before we do any planning for the additional criteria pieces, any feedback from you is greatly appreciated, because we will take that into account as we continue planning. And if we need to include other stakeholders, we can definitely consider that too. So just know this is kind of like we're trying it with criteria 1 tonight, and then we are definitely open to any feedback that you have.
Can I step in just 1 second? I think, does anybody not know how to raise their hand? using Zoom. So if anybody has questions, click on the participants, and at the bottom you'll see raise hand. So I know that there was a question to that earlier. So.
Yes, thank you. And I think some of it comes when I share my screen, it takes away some of those controls. So if you hit escape, you can always get back to the screen that you're more used to as well.
So I think,
right.
Yep,
Oh,
Matt,
sorry.
take it.
Okay, I wasn't sure. And just to like follow up on Leslie's point, I think criteria 1 maybe has some more things that tend to kind of explore the expertise of our educators, but I think there's other criteria where we're going to find our community members are particularly, experts in that opinion. So I think depending on the criteria, hopefully we find a little bit more comfort in people being able to answer that question. But to support your vote today, I came to summarize some of the information that our team collected in order to present to you to help you process where you feel like it goes on the continuum. So you'll see a letter next to some of the data, if you will, that we collected from some of the experts of the district to help us inform our decision making today. So you can kind of see for letter A, some information that might be helpful when you're considering where you want to rate that on the continuum is that prior to our 4-year-old kindergarten program, we do not have any like systemic or district approved programming prior to 4K. So for example, some other communities might have something called Head Start, which would allow for what's called a high quality daycare option for people who might have low income or low socioeconomic status, for example. So in our district, prior to 4K, opportunities for your child to go to a high quality daycare would depend on a family's own finance and their access and their schedules and those kinds of things. If a child has a disability, though, we do have programming for children depending on their needs that could start at 3 years old in the school district. In regards to B, which we don't have on this slide, but we do offer a full day 5-year-old kindergarten according to the state and local mandates and the standards that are set. Regarding C, which is about the educators in our 4K through 3rd grade. And you'll see that in our 4K, we have 14 educators and they all hold valid Wisconsin teaching licenses required by the Department of Public Instruction. And that's the same with our teachers that are within the district K through 3 as well.
I'm going to jump in here 1 second. The one that's holding that teacher license that's pending approval, it's not from my building, but I believe that teacher had moved from another state. So they have a teaching license in another state. Their Wisconsin license is pending. And often, I don't know the scenario of this one, but often that is a case of like taking a Wisconsin history class and then validating that, and then you can get the Wisconsin license. So that's part of the licensure process. And if it's also pending, it could be applied for, but it also just may be sitting in DPI's files waiting for approval.
Thanks for adding that, Katie.
Yep.
So just some more details is teachers of 4K students must hold an elementary or regular education license that includes pre-kindergarten and kindergarten standards. So that's something that all of our 4K teachers currently have. In regards to D, we don't have systemic or vision and hearing screening that happens until a child is at 5K. So we do have something called the early learner screener, which is something that families sign up for their 3 and 4-year-olds to get screened. It is part of our Child Find practices, and Child Find is a way to find children with disabilities in order to meet their needs prior to them entering the actual school system. So that's something that we do have vision and hearing screening at, but it's not something that's done for all children outside of attending that. If a family reaches out to a staff member, we do have individuals in our district that can help them with enrollment in Medicaid or Badger Care, which is part of that D criteria as well. It's not something we actively seek or remind, but if families reach out, we do have that support. And then about vaccinations, we do provide reminders about being vaccinated prior to coming to 5-year-old kindergarten that go out. That is also a reminder for hearing and vision screening as well. Those are both part of the state policies that your child before attending 5-year-old kindergarten should be vaccinated fully and should have their hearing and vision screened by a primary care provider, but it's not necessarily that we're following up on every single case that comes through. And then as for E, all of our 4K sites do follow the early learning standards as again identified by Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. As for a formal transition from early learning or 4K to 5K, there aren't any formal transitions. There are some times where principals do meet with our administrators that oversee the 4K sites to help with student transitions, particularly students that maybe were having a harder time, maybe needed additional supports, or those with IEPs or individualized education programs. So that's a lot of information. What questions do people have about some of this data?
Diane, go ahead. I saw your hand up.
Thanks. So I don't know if this is in the scope of exactly what we're looking at, but so it strikes me that opportunity can exist and access can exist, and that doesn't mean that all students that need the service are enrolled in it. So I guess what I'm wondering about is what you know in terms of, well, I assume you wouldn't know if there is an early childhood age child in the district unless the parents actually registered and showed up. So I'm kind of wondering, you know, what happens in terms of ensuring that all populations are understanding the services. I'm thinking about language and parents understanding that the service exists. I'm wondering about things like attendance or transportation, and then sort of language. I don't know what that looks like in Waunakee, but just thinking about if the parents are, you know, English as second language learners, and this is a small child, so they're probably, you know, immersed in the first language of the family, kind of how that is dealt with. Are those too outside the scope of what we're talking about, or are those the right kind of questions to ask? Please coach me.
I think all questions are the right questions to ask. We will be taking notes today on all of the discussion so that we can come back to topics or have further follow-up. If we do feel like we have a piece of discussion that comes up that isn't tied to the criteria, then we'll just make sure that we've, you know, got it captured. So thank you for bringing those things up. I'm just looking ahead to see, I know that specifically language will be addressed and the issues with access that it can bring up. But when we take a look at the specific elements of this criteria, I guess we can just keep those questions that you had in mind and decide if those barriers, you know, shift where we put it on the continuum, I would say. I don't know if others have ideas about that.
Monique, go ahead. You had your hand up first and then Pam after her.
Just a quick comment back to Diane about, you know, how do we know about some families, especially if they might be an ELL family. I did a lot of registrations over the summer for our EL families because I do speak Spanish. And one of the questions that's asked on the registration form, which does help the tracking of students is you have to list all your family members. So if somebody has a new baby, which we had many new babies, or maybe a 1 or 2 year old sibling in the family, that child and their birth dates are listed on the registration form. So that helps the tracking of who's coming through the system. I am not a registration expert, but I know that as a family, everybody is listed on the school registration form for, say, your 4K or your kindergartner. So that does help with that process.
Thank you, Monique.
To follow up on Monique, so then when we have our, we use Infinite Campus, which most of you parents have access to log in. When you look up a specific student, it will list their whole family on there, and it will even list like the 2-year-old. And then as the 2-year-old, the next year would roll over to a 3-year-old. Now we know that family has a 3-year-old and they become a 4-year-old. Like, so the whole family will jump in, and they'll be actually like set in a class of a specific year to start with us, if that makes sense.
And Tim, is that solely from registration, or is there, I can't think of the word, but you send out like these. Thank you. Census. Yes. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, so everything starts from the census. In fact, we just completed our census recently, the most recent update. So that's the core of our outreach. But then as new families come into the district, they may contact us, they may contact our registrar. We also work through our partner centers. Does that answer your question, Gina, or?
Yes. Can you clarify what you mean by partner centers? I don't even know what that.
So, I mean, sometimes when families with young children and the oldest child is of preschool age, they may not directly engage with the school, but they may be seeking childcare in one of the community centers that we partner with for 4K. And so even if they weren't in the census, that's another avenue where we make sure folks are aware of the option.
Okay. Mel, is there anything else, or let's dive in?
I mean, I want to just circle back, and did we meet your, I mean, your question was very long, Diane, and it had a lot of pieces to it, and I'm not sure if we're able to answer all of that. But do you have some questions about like this, like the early learners or the school readiness type stuff related to that? From my perspective, I'd say our district's pretty good about making sure things are translated in Spanish right away, but our kiddos that have different primary languages, that's probably less often happening, at least in like that whole informative type situation where if there's a flyer or something like that, it might be in English and Spanish, but if a child was speaking Mandarin, we wouldn't necessarily have that automatically in that unless we knew that they needed something translated for that family. You know, and then for transportation beyond, you know, our 4K and 5K, since we're not doing anything systematically, again, it would be on the parents or families to get a child to a child care center unless they were part of the busing routes for a 4K or 5K student.
Pam, you've had your hand up for a long time. Are you good to go?
Yeah, so I'm still trying to situate, get a sense of what my role is here and what I can contribute here, because I think part of some of the other questions that have just been raised seem to be raising the question of how well are community members aware of these. So these questions are here. Does the district do this? You're telling me this is what the district does. I can say, oh, that's great, and check, you know, terrific. But I can't. It's hard for me to, as a community member, to say whether I am fully aware of these or whether the communication about these programs exist. And for instance, if I have a kid in high school, I'm either not aware of what's going on in the elementary schools, or I'm just not paying any attention to it. So again, I'm just trying to get a sense of what I can contribute here beyond saying, okay, you told me these things exist. I can say they exist.
If I can jump in off of that, I think for me, a clarifying question would be, what do we hope to accomplish by the end of this hour, or what this sort of process looks like? It sounds like people are uncomfortable saying their opinion on something they know little about, perhaps, where, is there a definitive that we're coming to at the end, or is this more of an information gathering process that then ultimately we can answer to the best of our knowledge and then write down questions that we may still have as we go through the process?
So we will preview kind of the protocol that we will use tonight as we're looking through them coming up in just a moment. Our end goal is kind of part of that, but generally speaking, you know, we're not coming forward with recommendations about this criteria by the end of the night. Tonight's goal is, first of all, to get familiar with what this is going to look like. And then as far as criteria 1, we will be determining where we think it fits along that scale. And we'll talk more about that with the protocol coming up.
Thank you. I think just in that sense of trying on the tool, it's kind of what I'm hearing say, so that this is something that might feel uncomfortable, but it might be just an informing process as we go along.
Yeah.
This is Joel. Sorry I didn't raise my hand. Can't find the function. I think one thing that might just help is, I guess for me, the reason why I haven't really said anything, because I just want to kind of see the whole presentation. I guess for me, I just thought this was, you're just giving us information. And then I thought we were going to vote later on to kind of figure out what we like, what we don't like. So I don't know, maybe a suggestion would be, maybe we should just let you just kind of get through it. And then we can kind of discuss it just for time.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's helpful. We do want to make sure that everybody, you know, is with us, but I would agree that we've got some information that coming up that does address some of these things.
Bethany, go ahead. You had your hand up.
I was just thinking that it was really helpful to hear from somebody who's not in the school district, to think about, like, yeah, we have this 4K program available, but is it really accessible to everyone? Or are there some barriers that I was thinking, like, oh, I hadn't really thought about that barrier that might exist for some of our community members. So I feel like it's really helpful to have those voices to bring up things that might be happening from a community member's perspective that those of us who are so engrossed in schools just aren't seeing because we're inside the schools.
Agreed. Everybody's voice here is going to be helpful. And if it doesn't feel like it yet, I'm sorry about that. Hopefully it will soon. Okay, any other hands? I'm struggling to see I've got 2 screens now, but I'm still.
No hands, go ahead.
Okay. All right, Mel, are we ready to go beyond this? Perfect. All right, Katie's going to talk a little bit about tonight's process.
Yeah, so today we have a Google form that we're going to ask each of you to complete independently, just on criteria 1. We're just going to dabble in this process. And what this is this is not going to be the final say. This is just to allow for equity of voice from everybody. And so if you don't know, answer honestly. And what's going to happen is that will produce results as to where the whole committee falls on where we are in this. And then we'll open it up for discussion. So for each element, we'll preview after everybody has taken the form independently, we're going to preview the results. I'm going to open the floor for discussion, throwing ideas on the table, and then we're going to make a motion for placement of where the group would be. Now, knowing that motion would be there, Allison is going to be taking notes of the questions and the ideas that are put out, that we may place it on some part of the continuum but we have all these side pieces that we want to investigate further, or that we have questions about, or the reasons why we're placing it there. And that could lead us to future steps where we want to make recommendations for the board and the school district. In order to come to some type of agreement, we'll use a fist to 5. So a 0 is you completely disagree after a motion is made, all the way up to a 5 is saying, yep, I'll lead it, I'm on it, this is totally in where I want to be. If you're in the 4 or the 5, we'll move forward for the consensus. If you're in the 1, 2 area, I'll ask you, or as a facilitator, just to say, why are you there? What would make you come up to a 4 or 5, or what do you need more from this? And those would be then the things that we can take down as notes to move us forward. Okay. And then we may need a complete fist to 5 again if someone persuades the group to go a different direction. So we'll go through each of the elements after everyone's taken that independent survey. Any questions on the protocol that we're going to go through? Great. You want to go to the next slide, Gina? So in a second, I'll put the link out for the Google form. But in here, there is a link to the discussion notes that is in yellow. So if you have that, you can open those up on your screen. That is where Allison, I can also throw that link into the chat for those of you that need it. So this is for the discussion notes that Allison will be taking notes on. And we have these for each of the criterias. Again, we're only going to be working on criteria 1. So once we come to a consensus on the continuum score, she'll kind of write that there, but she'll be taking notes in any of the discussions that we have in there, questions that may arise. Again, just kind of a definition of consensus so we all understand a group has arrived at a consensus when it meets true criteria. All points of view have not merely been heard, but also actively solicited. And that's what I'm going to try to do as a facilitator today. The will of the group is evident, even those who most oppose it. So you have the opportunity to speak your words, but you are going to be part of the group moving forward. All right, so what I'm going to do is in the chat, I am going to put in the link to the Google form. If everyone can open that, and we will take a little bit of time to have everyone complete that independently.
Saying I need permission?
Yeah, I was going to say that same thing.
Oh, because you are not in the district, right? Okay, let me change the settings. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah, and we can just close it back up after tonight.
Yep. So why don't you refresh your screen, and you should probably have permission. Does it work now? Great.
If it's helpful, I'm going to put the data back up on the screen.
And just to clarify, Katie put a second link where it says link to form. So if you're not familiar with that, it's a Google form where you're able to privately respond to the different questions. Instead of putting it on the discussion notes, that way you can fill out the form and have your private responses to the different parts.
Okay, I'm sorry. Where's that separate form? Because I seem to be using a Google Doc that other folks are using as well. This is Leslie.
So it's the second link that Katie shared in the chat.
Okay.
We can share it again.
Oh, that's fine. It's in the chat. That's fine.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, so I will go to.
Sorry about that.
Sorry for any confusion.
It says link to form, and you'll open it up and it's purple, and it's multiple choice.
Thank you.
Yep.
I can get into the form, but I can't access the document. It says I need access.
Okay, we can also open that up.
So I requested access for that.
So that's because you probably don't have, you're not part of the folder. You might not be logged in with the email address that's in the shared drive folder. So
I think the discussion notes we can reshare after the meeting perhaps, but for tonight, the main focus that we need to take care of first is the form itself, so.
Okay.
Kathy, it looks like it's shared with your Waunakee school address one.
Okay, I don't have it anymore. It's a different email address.
Do you want to make sure that Rebecca McDonough gets whatever email address you're using? Because then she can add you to that folder.
Yep.
Can I just ask a quick question? So when we say early learning, are we specifically going to refer to that as 4K in our school district, or are we talking earlier than that? Just so we're all on the same page of viewing it.
Can I ask which one you're asking about specifically?
Well, I was just starting off with the first one. It said early learning program. So are we going to refer to that as 4K?
So this whole criteria kind of talks about, PK through third grade, really.
So it's pre-K to third grades, but in our district, that isn't part of public school, but that might be part of the discussion, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, because this topic of readiness is really all about how prepared kids are for the part that is our district. Yeah. Good question.
Tina, do you want me to screen share the results?
Sure, yep, I can stop sharing.
So I have 22 responses. I see there's 25 participants. Does anyone need more time? Just speak up. Happy to do it if we need it.
One of those is Rebecca.
Oh, thank you.
Not that we don't want to hear from you, Rebecca, but I don't think you're in the form.
All right, I don't hear anyone speaking up that they need more time. So I am going to screen share the results.
And they'll live update. So if you're nearly finished, just please finish up and we'll get your results whenever you're ready.
Yep. All right. So what we are going to do is we're just going to look at letter A. The opportunity exists for all students in our community to access high quality early learning programs. You can see the results here. 50, I will make this a little bigger actually. Whoa, my computer is slower than my clicking. So 58% say that we're improving, so element is demonstrated. And we then get 16% as emerging. We have 4% is not, or 4 or 16% is not apparent. And then we have 8% is flourishing. I'm going to open the floor for any discussion. Right now, we're at the point of saying the majority is saying improving. For those of you that did not say improving, where do you fall? Why do you fall? The floor is open.
This is Joel. I guess for me, what I struggled with that is, you know, obviously we moved to Waunakee because of the great school system, right? So, you know, that's evident. But I don't know, reading the question that all students in our community, do they have the same abilities as other families have? And I think that's where I was just kind of struggling because, you know, if you have two parents who are involved or who know who to ask, they might be able to get their kids' needs met versus just say another family who's in our district don't necessarily have that same family dynamic. They might have access, but how do they get to that? Right. I think there's a difference. So I think it was hard for me. So I just kind of put, you know, based on me being here and having 4 kids, yes, awesome. And we haven't had any issues, but I don't necessarily know if everybody else would feel the same families wide.
Yeah. Melanie, I see your hand. And then Paul.
Yeah, so I felt similar to Joel where I put it as not a parent. I think that word all is hard to say, that all can access high quality early learning. And I'm thinking prior to 4K when I answer that. I think about a lot of the examples that Joel just brought up about finances and schedules and how many, you know, adults are in the home. Even when I think of 4K, it's a half-day program, so you need to have some sort of wraparound care. And do all families have access to appropriate wraparound care? So really, I feel like people have equitable access maybe when it gets to 5K, but prior to that, saying all students have equitable access, I just couldn't agree with.
I just wanted to, I guess, give a breakdown of where my answer came from. I believe I did improving only because I have a 15-year-old and a 5-year-old, and so I got to see the process 10 years ago versus today, and it does seem a lot better because our 15-year-old was not allowed to, 4K wasn't really a thing at that point. Now it is. And so that's helped me to see that it seemed fairly easy compared to other school districts. So I was improving, but that's where my answer came from.
Any other thoughts?
Diane has her hand up.
So this is in tune, I think, with some of the other comments. It feels like that it exists and that there's policies and there's practices, even intended, is sort of like an input. And I think it feels like it's the output of being able to measure, you know, what, like was said, what all means or what those other factors are. So that might be my struggle with a couple of these, is being able to differentiate between the two.
Bethany, go ahead.
I just wondered if we have any data about how many of our kids who end up coming to us in kindergarten do use the 4K program or go to another preschool. Like, do we have any data about that? Because I wonder if that would help us to know how accessible those things really are.
I could put a guesstimate out there.
Yeah.
I could put a guesstimate out there just based on our kindergarten placements that around 80+% have attended a 4K. That's a guesstimate, so don't quote me on anything, but we could easily get that data from our enrollments.
Leslie, go ahead.
So I think I gave it emerging, and I actually was on a fence of really giving it not apparent. Probably more towards the not apparent. And the reason why is because how do we define high quality early learning programs? So it's very difficult to understand how we're able to assess this without fully grasping and understanding what high quality early learning programs consist of. So I said emerging with really a lack of understanding of how it's defined. So I'm just going to kind of leave it there because I'm not certainly sure what that completely means. I'm getting a better understanding as other committee members are giving some input, but it still doesn't give the full context of what that means. Thank you.
For those of you that put in improving, can you put any ideas on the floor as to why you chose that?
Do I have to raise my hand to talk? I'm sorry. Can I go ahead?
Go ahead.
I put improving, and I think I'd like to think that I believe that the opportunity exists for all of our students, and I believe that Waunakee has really good learning programs. But I don't necessarily know if all of our citizens are aware of the opportunities, and so I put in improving. I have got an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old, so I'm going through a lot of this early 4K things right now. And also, I mean, as a person who works for DPI, I'd like to, I believe and I'd like to think that. So maybe that gives me some sort of bias in that end. So I put improving. Thank you.
Melissa, I see your hand is raised.
I put improving, partly because I do know that now there is a 4K program. When my kids were in school, there wasn't. I do have some of the same questions about like if they're available, but does everybody know that they're available? And I just wasn't sure about the flourishing piece. I didn't feel like I had enough information to say that it was, necessarily flourishing.
Thank you. Bethany?
I did put improving, but I was a bit on the fence about if it should maybe be emerging. And it's because of, like, I think that the opportunity exists, but I just don't know how much friction there is for some families or how many barriers there might be for some families as far as, like someone said, the wraparound care, being able to get their kids to the 4K program if it's a half day. And then I also answered this before we had the conversation about 4K versus 3-year-old preschool. And if we're talking about 3-year-old preschool, then that really doesn't exist. So so those were kind of my reservations when I answered improving.
I'm not sure who was first, Joel or Melanie.
Joel beat me.
This is just I just feel so. My kids are older, but now when you say 4K, right? So our kids went to 4K at a daycare, right? So they had a 4K program that way. Now, when we're talking about 4K, are we talking about that same type of 4K, or is there a different setup for 4K?
All Waunakee 4Ks are housed in daycares. None of them are housed in the actual elementary buildings. We do service some of our like 3-year-olds in the programs, but they would have IEPs. And so that is actually done this year at Heritage. It's based on space. But all 4Ks are done in local daycares or other facilities.
Okay, with a certified teacher, right?
With a certified teacher that is, yeah, and like Amy Johnson, our K6 director of curriculum instruction, she actually is the like administrator for 4K. So they are part of the Waunakee School District.
And so that part is new, Joel, since your kids would have been in the 4K program. Those would have been independent programs that had no partnership with the district. And so that partnership, in my opinion, is an improvement because it standardizes, it allows for better communication between the district. It does require that same certification, and it also is funded, if I'm not mistaken. That half-day part is funded for people. And so that's a definite benefit to access for more people.
Yep.
That's good. I didn't know that, but thank you for informing me.
Yep.
I think Mel is next.
So just one thing that I thought about as other people were sharing is students with behavioral challenges, not necessarily identified as having a disability related to those behavioral challenges, they're not necessarily guaranteed to stay in a daycare setting if they're having those challenges. And so I think that's another barrier. Again, it's more prior to 4K, I'd say, where those students aren't guaranteed. And there are students and families that are asked to leave some daycare centers in the community because of their behavior challenges. Something for the committee to be aware of as well.
Michelle, go ahead.
I just wanted to let people know too that busing is available for a number of those 4K sites. So that's another area of allowing kids access.
Busing is available for all 4Kers. They will often transfer like at our buildings, and then we set up support systems, little buddies, those types of things.
I do feel like that new information, I guess I didn't realize that they were able to kick kids out of those programs. That changes my feelings a little bit, because that doesn't have, to me, that doesn't seem like full access.
Laura?
I think I started at the not a parent because I had a lot of unanswered questions. when I think of some of the statistics that are shared about possibly 80% of people accessing this and other people with opportunities, but perhaps barriers, I probably would put in that improving range, knowing more that we're doing more than emerging, but we have room to grow. So just kind of a way to sort of slide my thinking.
So I don't see Laura just spoke. That's the only hand that's up. I know we have multiple of these to go through and we have 20 minutes left of our time. So I want to try to get us to a point of a little bit of a consensus here. I'm hearing quite a bit of improving or emerging. If everyone is kind of agreeing on that, and I guess I'm not as familiar with the scale as maybe Mel or Gina is. Can we put like a dash in between and say we're somewhere in between there?
I mean, I think for today, you know, we're running the audit together. That's what we're doing. So we are taking notes, and I think today, you know, we can certainly put that we're in between the two unless people feel ready to make a distinction between them. I think certainly in the interest of time, maybe it's a good place to put a pin in it for that part of the criteria.
So I'm not sure if I can see everybody on my screen because I'm also presenting my other screen. Oh, yikes. Sorry, Allison, I'm taking notes there. Wondering if we can do a quick fist to 5 on emerging / improving. How would people feel saying we're sit there and we can move on to the next one? So I don't see any 1s or 2s, so I'll say we'll kind of move on. Awesome. So we'll go on to B. This one's a little more divided. Our school offers full-day kindergarten and compliance with the state and local mandates. We have improving at 50% exactly and flourishing at 50%. Why don't we start with the improving people if you wanted to open the floor for that? Why'd you pick improving over flourishing?
Monique, go ahead.
I struggled in general to put flourishing on anything. I tended to be pretty regular with my comment that it's improving. I mean, flourishing to me means for improvement. I was to use the term flourishing. So I answer improving because I'm really well in things, but there's always room for improvement.
Thanks, Monique.
Melissa had her hand up.
I will basically say the same thing. It's like, I think I just didn't have enough information to say that it was flourishing. So I chose improving.
Thank you, Melissa. Gina?
I also specifically struggled with the idea of innovation and inclusiveness in kindergarten. I don't know of any specific work towards being particularly inclusive. This is not a judgment, it's just that it's not something that I'm aware is actively being sought out. So that was why I landed in the improving space.
Leslie.
Yeah, I feel the same way with improving. Again, I think that there's always room for improvement. And again, I have to be honest with you. I don't know what compliance is with state and local mandates. So I actually thought I was being generous when I did put in for improvement only because I'm not so certain if the school district is under compliance, following compliance. I'm pretty certain they are, but to what extent? To what extent, and what does that look like? So that's my reason for putting in improving.
Melanie?
Yeah, I just felt like that innovation and inclusiveness, I didn't personally have what I felt like it were a lot of examples of that. I think we have it's strong and it's probably at or above where the state would, want us to be. But, I work in 2 elementary schools and I feel like there's definitely room to grow on the inclusiveness piece.
Thanks. Joel?
So, I agree with, I think it's more about wording for me. Again, I think when it comes to state and local mandates, I'm assuming we're compliant. I guess most of my knowledge is just based on why I came to this community in terms of school and schooling and test scores and just opportunities. So, I think flourishing is hard for me to say because I think if we were in a district that was flourishing, I guess that everybody would be impacted in that positive way. And I'm not sure if that's the case, but definitely I think we're close to it. I think we're doing some great stuff. So maybe it's just for me more about, again, I think, and it was said before, I think we could always improve because I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where we're just like, doing everything right all the time. So
I'm going to open the floor for anyone who put flourishing.
And Christy had a question in the chat. As far as I'm aware, we have no teachers of color in kindergarten staff and speakers of more than one language. I'm aware of Kyle Emmert, who is an emerging Spanish speaker because I know he subbed for me.
So one of the things I'm thinking about as we're doing this audit is like, sky's the limit. Like if we're reimagining and, like throwing it all out there, like what would this, I'm not saying our schools aren't amazing, but what would it truly be? And really trying to put ourselves in other shoes of other different families, et cetera. So I'm like going big here. Like if we're truly gonna be flourishing, I want a diverse staff. I want multiple languages spoke. I don't know. I think we should just put it all out there. So I guess that's why I think I did improving. Yeah, we do the mandate, but are we flourishing?
Anyone who put flourishing want to speak? Maybe they have other insight.
I had put flourishing. I guess I'm more literal, and I went with compliance with state and local mandates. And when I think of our school district going above and beyond sort of to meet those basic educational needs, that's kind of what I think of. So like, I think some of us are interpreting it, thinking outside the box with an equity lens, which is probably the right way to do it. But I guess I thought of it in terms of the literal question. So I'm a little stuck in terms of what lens we're looking from altogether.
Laura, I'll just agree with you wholeheartedly because that's basically exactly how I looked at it too. I think I took it very literally, and I really appreciate those comments, and it almost makes me feel bad for not saying improving to a certain extent because yes, there's things we could do better. In my head, I start thinking, well, yeah, we could do some things better, but then my brain goes to how much is that going to cost? And that's such a difficult concept too. I mean, we could do a whole heck of a lot to improve, but at some point there's the people who have to make those decisions start looking at diminishing returns. And we have a whole lot of things we have to take care of on a weekly and monthly basis. So thanks for saying that, Laura, because I couldn't say it any better.
So if I'm hearing the group, I'm hearing that if we just say the local and state mandates, we're probably flourishing, but if we're thinking about innovation, we need improvement. Could we put that as our piece?
Well, I guess I would say, I mean, flourishing as it's defined here applies to each of the different criteria. So in the statement about flourishing, it specifies not just compliance. Compliance is under improving. Flourishing is more than compliance. So yes, the wording says it's in compliance, but then we have to consider, are we in compliance and that's improving? Or are we innovating and focusing on inclusiveness? So,
yeah. Thanks for that clarification. I think with that, maybe based on the discussion, then I would say that we are probably in the improving category and hearing all the pieces of everyone speaking. So I put the motion out there for a fist of 5 of saying we're improving.
Can I say one more thing before we do the fist of 5?
Go ahead.
There's compliance. So there's two pieces here. State and local mandates aren't around, maybe I'm wrong, aren't around inclusiveness and whatnot. That's equity work. Compliance to me is safety, academics. What else might fall in state and local mandates?
again, I think it comes back to the fact that the wording of the continuum says that improving is compliance. So the whole opportunity audit is about opportunity and about equity. And so I would urge us to just always have that lens. And yes, sometimes we'll need to come back to the specific wording of the question and make sure that we're not taking it in a direction that's unintended. But in this particular instance, compliance is defined specifically as improving. Are others reading it differently, or is that something we can agree on?
That's how I read it as well, Gina. I almost forgot compliance was in that item line. I was referring to the compliance mentioned in the continuum language.
Yeah. I hope that doesn't happen often where we've got wording within the continuum that corresponds with that.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that, Gina. I think that's where I was getting confused. So I'm good.
Okay, great.
So can we do a fist to 5 then on improving? I do not see any 3s on the, or any 1s or 2s on the screen, so we will move forward with that. Mike, I'm going to throw this back to you. So it's been taking about 15 minutes a question, knowing we have 7 minutes left. I don't know if I want to start the next question. I think wondering if we go to our exit slip and get feedback from staff on this process, or from not staff, I'm very used to that language, I apologize. From the people on the committee here for their feedback on the process, and then the facilitators, we can meet again and kind of think about how we want to move forward, if we want to, how we can make this easier, better, getting everyone's feedback.
I mean, that sounds fine to me.
Okay. So in the chat,
can I ask
just put it there,
when
Katie.
our next meeting is? Like, how long of a time do we have before we? I just don't want to feel like we're backtracking to get back to what we thought.
Off the top of my head, I actually don't know.
We're meeting on the third Tuesday of the month.
Okay, thank you. So we're to we have switched to just monthly?
I think so.
Okay. So I don't know. I mean, I want to be respectful to the rest of what's on the agenda, and we didn't have a good sense of how long this would take, so we apologize for taking this much time. But I do worry that we're going to have to spend more time than we would if we just commit to being really efficient. I don't know.
But this is Joel. So I think the thing is that this is going to require a lot of discussion and explanation. So I think that's the area we have to figure out how can we figure that, you know, condense that so that when we are reading it, we can be more efficient doing this. Do you think maybe we should like set time aside just extra to do this? Or do we need to come together sooner to be able to do this or complete it? I don't know. Do we do some homework prior to that so it's easier? I don't know what to just, you know, what we should do.
I mean, Joel, my initial take is the first time you do anything, it's going to take longer. I just used a new snowblower on my office's driveway and it took me probably 4 hours, and it should have taken me half an hour because I had to do the whole thing twice. So I'm assuming the next time we come around and do this, it's going to be a lot faster, just because we're not going to have to familiarize ourselves with the process.
Yeah. All right.
But I mean, I'd be fine with having another meeting before next month in order to just wrap this up. I think that would be fine. And it probably would only take 30, 45 minutes too.
Yeah, no, this is a busy time. I'm just concerned that we're gonna have to remember why, like, I won't even remember how I voted next time. You know what I mean?
You know, maybe, Mike, maybe we do that, come up with another meeting before our next one, just so we can get some headroom. Because again, we do have other stuff on the agenda, which if we keep going the same pace we're going now, we're never going to be able to get to that stuff as well. So I don't know. I mean, I don't mind meeting again, but maybe we bring it up for a vote.
Sure. Nia, you had her hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, I finally followed the rules. I have my hands up. I have a suggestion for meetings. We could time box everything. We could say, hey, we've got 10 minutes for this. And I have these fancy little meeting cubes, or literally like I flip in and we just go through it. Okay, we say what we need in that 10 minutes, we're done, we move on. We say what we need in that 10 minutes, we move on. It takes a little getting used to, but it's really good at like pushing people through. It's just an idea. It works really well in large meetings. I don't know if you guys want to try that.
I fully agree with you, Nia. And would you believe it? I have actually suggested that for full board meetings. I may have said that after we had one go for 6 hours.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. It really helps people just focus, you know, like everyone wants to get things done. It really helps.
I think that's a good idea. And I think we can work with Rebecca and how to maybe word that so everybody sees in advance and has an expectation for next time we're doing this. It's a good idea.
Thanks.
Good. Are we still okay with everybody taking the exit slip that Allison put in the chat? Just to get feedback on the process? It should only take a minute or two.
Okay. There's a good suggestion in the chat that we could actually do the audit prior to the meeting too. So we actually have some time to think about it and look at it and then come back in here and do the actual discussion. That could save us 10, 15 minutes.
Yep, somehow we'd have to get you some of the extra data prior to taking that piece too.
Sure.
Yeah, we thought about having that opportunity to ask questions about the data would be tricky.
Does anyone need more time with the exit slip?
I'll be quick. You
I'll
can
be
go.
quick too, Katie.
Mike, do you want to move on?
Yeah, definitely. Joel, why don't you go ahead with, I guess, agenda item number 6.
All right, so just being cognizant of the time because it is 7:30. So I think what we should probably do, just because I don't want to rush. Hold on. I don't want to rush the discussion. But did everyone take a look at the folder with all the comments in it? Yes. If you just put your thumb up or shake your head or something. Okay. Thank you. There's just a lot of concerning stuff that I believe we do need to address as a committee. Now, I know some of the stuff is not necessarily school related, meaning inside of the school, but some of the stuff is community related. But then we also have just people saying there are things in school that have been said or done. So what I'm just going to do, just because, like I said, I think we need to focus our attention more and maybe take a little bit more time, just kind of table this until our next discussion so we can have a deep, thorough conversation about this. But before I do that, does anyone have any feedback, or was anybody actually surprised that this stuff was happening? And you could just unmute, or Mike, if you could just check if people have their hands up.
There's no hands up yet, but I'll speak for myself. And given that I wrote some of the things, no, I was not surprised.
Okay.
Pam, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering if the students' perspectives got represented in this document. Did the students on our committee contribute to the I mean, I guess it's an anonymous document, but Isabel brought up a lot of things at the last meeting that didn't make it to this list. So I just wanted to make sure the students know that they can contribute to this, and hopefully will feel comfortable doing so.
I just want to interject. I think this is where the problem goes, because obviously this is live, right? So that means that the whole community could be seeing this. So I think that could put people in a situation if they do want to voice something and they don't feel comfortable voicing it. because they're worried that people are going to judge them or retribution. I'm just saying things. So I think we just have to be careful, especially when we discuss this as well, that we have to understand that we don't really know the implications that can happen based on it. But I do agree, students do need to participate. It would be nice for them to participate and hear their voice, but I think we do have to be aware there's another element to this as well. Does anyone else have anything they want to say?
Bethany, go ahead. Leslie, go ahead. You're up first.
I do have my hand up. Yeah, so I'm sorry, I was not able to make the last meeting, and perhaps, and I get anywhere between 100 and 150 emails a day. Perhaps I missed this, and if it's in a location, because I have not read this, but I would like to read it and certainly give you my feedback.
We do have a folder, so as long as Rebecca has your well, I'm assuming because you're on this, it should be there. What was it titled? Just anonymous. What was it?
It's anonymous incident list.
Yeah. So that's what it'll be titled. So that's what you want to look at, and anybody can add to it. And really, do you remember the discussion, Leslie, that basically it's so if people had an incident, they can put it on there, so we could discuss it.
Okay.
I think I see a couple hands. Bethany?
Yeah, you had just asked if we were surprised. And I have to say, after joining this committee, no. But before joining this committee, I was not really aware that these things were going on. And I recognize that that is, purely because I'm in a place of privilege and I don't have those things happening to me. And so I'm really sad to say that I didn't know they were going on. And I'm glad that now we have a forum so that people can know that they are going on, and it makes it all the more urgent that we do this work to make sure that this stops. I did want to just make sure that everyone knows that it's not totally anonymous, because you can see the history of like who put the comments. And Joel, speaking to your point about kind of repercussions that people might face if they put something in the document or if they voice something. So I wondered if, if it would be helpful to have people that, like, if somebody wants to add something to the list, but they don't want to put it there themselves because people can see who put it on, if it would be helpful to know, like, oh, here's a person that I can tell and they can put it on the list for me.
I mean, I'll volunteer myself for that. So if anybody has anything that they want me to put on there, I definitely will. So
I don't know if it would be helpful to have, like, here's a list of people who are happy to put things on the list if someone prefers to be anonymous.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And I would suggest they be to someone like Joel, because Joel's personal emails are not subject to open records either. Whereas if you email them to me, they are. So that's probably a good way to do it.
Oh, thanks, Mike.
Not that I'm trying to avoid open meetings laws to anyone who's watching this.
Diane?
Thanks. So it did not surprise me. There were more different examples than I, personally heard about, and I guess it's one. I think about how to use these in the context of this group, and I guess my first thought was, well, for example, when an incident happens within a classroom setting, which I think a couple of these examples were in a classroom setting, and when we're looking at the audit about teaching and learning, that might be an aspect that comes to mind, when I'm doing scoring, and then maybe to extend that then when we're talking about next steps and recommendations, what that will lead to. So I think that's one thing I kind of want to think about is how to utilize this data so that we can actually act on it.
Yep. I think that's how we have to view all of this, right? So, unless something specifically happens where we could address it, or if it's just in context, all these things are happening, what things are in place within our school district, what things are in place within our community to address these things and actually have a concrete plan. ABC happens, that type of thing. Gina, I see your hands up.
Yeah,
And then Laura, you'll be next.
I just wanted to clarify. Yeah, I also had some concerns about having it be in Google Doc form where it's important for us to be able to see it, but it is, as Bethany said, not anonymous. I also had some questions about the purpose because yeah, I think purpose number one may have already been met, that it's just awareness, because as Bethany said, I also am sheltered from some of this. And while not terribly surprised, I'm sad about it. I think that I just wanted to remind people, I sometimes get my committees confused, so I'm not sure. Is this something that the group is aware of? Through our partnership with Nehemiah, who Tim has spoken about before when we were talking about curriculum. Another thing that they are doing this year of service that they're providing to the district is an anonymous form that they as an outside group have so that students and families and teachers and community members can submit concerning incidents that occur. And then they problem solve and communicate in response, and it is then truly anonymous. So I'm just want to make sure that we're not like duplicating efforts, but I also recognize the importance of this. Maybe we need to do it in more than one place. So I just want to.
So Gina, I think, and I'd raise my hand except as a host. I
you
don't
have
have
a hand to raise.
Okay. You're good, Tim.
So I'll keep this short. I'll check with Nehemiah to clarify the tool that we may be working on with them may be limited to staff only. But I think regardless of whether it is or isn't, and regardless of exactly how we deal with this in the short term as the committee, I think I personally feel, and maybe we can get this to the next agenda item, really important for us to set up an anonymous reporting mechanism for students and staff in the district to report issues of bias and other hostile situations.
And Gina, just to answer your question, I guess I always feel it's better to have more eyes on a situation because again, Nehemiah is doing stuff, but that doesn't mean they're doing everything, right? And I think what we're doing as a committee could be different as well, right? Because I don't know the full scope, but what I'm saying is that I think kind of like what Tim said, though, you're focusing on the staff. So that might be different in terms of what responses are given, that type of thing. And I guess I feel like this is I think it's really more about identifying an issue and then figuring out what are we going to do with that issue? Are we okay to say we're not going to do anything? We'll leave it as it is. So I think that's always a good thing, and then I think Laura, you had your hand up.
I did. I think Gina spoke to most of it. I think we're on sort of two different tracks. We're on the audit track of kind of looking at a whole picture. And then we're in this track of looking at some urgent matters. And I think I agree with Tim in that we want to start collecting data of these situations. The one thing we need to be mindful of is how we present where we are in this process to people reporting, because again, right now, those things are informing our awareness, so we know what systems and structures to put in place so that staff and administration and families can learn how to join in partnership to deal with these issues together. So I think we're traveling as a team in a way of awareness, but we have a whole community and school district to bring along with us. So it's going to be a lot of education around that.
Leslie, go ahead, and then we'll go on to the final agenda item. Okay.
So I like to say that it's okay for us to have, number one, a zero tolerance policy. I did read this. And this is something that requires transparency across the entire school district. So this isn't just about the committee. This is actually about the educators and the administrators and also the students. When I read something like this is actually, I've been there. I've been there as a Black woman. And I am on a committee with many other educators who care about children in this community that have to understand this type of behavior and language causes a long-term effect in individuals' lives. This can't be taken lightly. This is about the community that we live in. And many of you that are sitting right here on the screen have many privileges and don't experience what other kids are experiencing. When we're talking about the criteria today, we have to also talk about it being through the lens of equity, access, and inclusion. So yes, we do need to have an inventory. We do need to create an anonymous system, program that people can share this. But more importantly, we should create a zero tolerance policy.
And you know,
It's important. That's my point. Thank you.
Well, that's a good
Leslie,
Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you for saying that. You know, I think it is definitely, this is one of the things that, especially when I was running for school board, these are the things that I was, one of the things, areas that I was focusing on. And there's so many different levels to the discussion we're having right now. You know, obviously right now, this is all surface level, but the whole goal of this and the reason why I wanted to put this agenda on here or as a running is because this is what I feel like the responsibility of our committee. We need to make this a priority just as much as we need to improve our school through equity tools and other issues. But when I hear a student tell me that they're called the N-word or this happens, for me, that brings it to a totally different level. That you know, and that should make everyone cringe. Like, this is not okay. And then if you bring it back to we're answering these questions on this tool, if you base it on some of these things, there's no way we're flourishing, right? Who's flourishing? You know, those type of things. So not to bring it there. And like I said, I think we need this type of conversation, this very real conversation, and just really hash things out and figure out what are we going to do, right? In Waunakee. So again, we're still going to have more conversation as this goes on because this is always going to be on the agenda. But I think this is something that we do need to make a priority.
Thanks, Joel.
Sorry, Mike.
No, that's perfect. You gave me a perfect segue because the last agenda item is one that I wanted to bring up. It's not going to be an action item today, so we can let you all get going. But it was written on there saying, you know, making interim recommendations. We can do that now by having a discussion and making motions and saying we think the district should be doing X, Y, or Z. So Tim brought up the idea of moving on an anonymous reporting system. I know, for example, Middleton has that because I've seen it on their website. So you can go ahead and report something anonymously. I think they have a program that they pay for that allows them to do that. I'm fairly certain Waunakee does not. That's something we could recommend. The committee could recommend a policy that bans the use of Native American imagery, which would have significant consequences, but it's been something that's been slowly happening over time. And were it not for a pandemic, we probably would have done in 2020 already. That could be something the committee could recommend to the full board to do. So this is informing Joel of this, but he and I are having a discussion again about some things that we can bring forward maybe for our next meeting for more discussion here. I think it'd also be prudent to, if anybody else has any other things that you've seen in the community that we could literally discuss right away and do, we could do that. I mean, we could have a disability rights attorney come in and do an audit of special education or accessibility of buildings. And we could do that instantaneously and make a recommendation to do that now. There really isn't any reason not to, but this is probably the right place to get that started. So I guess what I would ask is if anybody has any kind of ideas like that, they could be emailed to me. You can contact me directly and we could talk about that. And then Joel and I are probably going to put something together to put forth on the next agenda item for things that could be interim recommendations that we could make right now. Because we may not need to have a long, month-long discussion about certain things that we know right now can be changed and coming from this community. That could be just something that we get moving on right away and doesn't need to take any more time. So, I mean, again, you know, Leslie saying your issue about zero tolerance, that's an idea we could bring forward. It's never been lost on me since being on the board that we have expulsions for what I will define as almost harmless activity. And I'm talking about like marijuana possession. That's something that gets to the level of expulsion. I think someone being called a racial slur in class is far more harmful than that. And there's basically no sanction for it at times. So maybe we don't go all the way to zero tolerance, but it could be something where there is at least an actual procedure in place that we're working on and people know that we're working on. So that's all I have on that issue. I don't think we need discussion on it or anything like that because it'll be coming back next month. Next issue is future meetings. I think we already have one scheduled. Do we need one sooner rather than later for wrapping up the first part of the equity audit? I guess that's my question.
I vote we probably do that to get some headway. I mean, I'm open to doing it, but I do agree though. I think we do need before our next meeting because we didn't really get that far, right? I'm assuming.
Would everyone be fine with putting out another like a Google form for setting up another meeting in the next 2 or 3 weeks in order to do that?
So Mike, so the only reason why I'm saying we kind of have to figure this out soon is because Christmas is coming up and people, you know, with family and stuff. So I would probably say sooner rather than later, we should probably just decide, you know, a date because it's the 15th already.
Right.
What does everybody else think?
Joel, this is Nia. I'm more than willing to work on this over the holidays. That's just me. I celebrate Christmas, and if people don't, that's okay. I'm more than willing to work on it just to get ahead. But my only ask is that we do the time box thing so that we can actually really make some good progress.
I agree. That makes sense. So do we have to go through the Google Doc or could we just pick a date?
Whatever works. I mean, I'm fine with picking a date. I could do next Tuesday.
I mean, does this time work for everybody next week?
Next Tuesday is good for me. Same time.
Yeah, let me just check my calendar too.
Gina, go ahead. You had your hand up. Thank you for using hands.
Occasionally I remember. I was just going to point out that once January starts, the meeting isn't until the third Wednesday, or third Tuesday, is that correct, Rebecca? So that's the 19th?
Yes.
So we'd also have room, you know, that first full week of January as an option too. I personally am available on the 22nd because once break starts, where am I going? Nowhere. So, but that may not be true for everyone.
There is a meeting on Tuesday, the 22nd at 4 o'clock. It more than likely will be wrapped up by 6 o'clock, but that's not guaranteed.
What kind of meeting is that, Rebecca?
Co-curricular.
Oh yeah, that'll be fun. If anyone watched the meeting last night, they'll know why.
So Brian is on co-curricular.
Right.
Are you on co-curricular, Mike?
No.
Okay. I mean, that's the one potential issue is that I mean, and there may be other scheduling conflicts on the committee. I would say this is a meeting that we are in the process of scheduling. We haven't previously noticed it. We don't have to notice it for live streaming. So I don't see a complication with having the two meetings overlap from a streaming perspective. We just don't notice it as a streamed meeting. That's my suggestion. But there is the risk that Brian would not be able to participate at the beginning of the meeting potentially.
I mean, no disrespect.
That's fine. I didn't really participate today.
Without you.
I'm the silent observer from the board.
So,
Eagle eye for reading, though. That was impressive.
So should we just see if Tuesday, again, I'm sorry. I just don't like being overtime because, you know, I don't know what people have to do. Does Tuesday work for everybody?
It doesn't for me. It doesn't for me.
Okay. So how about this so we make it simple? Mike, could you just look at this? If Tuesday works for you, if everyone could just put their hands down, I mean, on the chat, if Tuesday works for you, could you just raise your hand on the chat?
How do you raise your hand on the chat? There you go.
I'm not on the chat. You know what I mean? Just raise your hand on the, how do you raise your hand? Like that, Tim, right?
All right, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we've got about 75% of the people here can do it. Tim had his hand up momentarily. I don't know if that included him or not. And I got you too.
So, I mean, that's a big amount. That's, you know, I think we should just go with it since it's, you know, short notice. Or does Wednesday work better for people?
No.
Okay. So, so should we just do Tuesday? And if you can make it, make it. If you can't, then we'll update you. All right.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Soliciting a note taker in Allison's absence, not it. Let me just.
And is it just so that we're all on the same, it's just to finish up criteria 1?
Correct. Yes, that's all it is.
Like, I just wanted to make sure everyone was not expecting like the additional criteria to be covered. Okay.
Right.
Because I don't even think that's not going to take an hour and a half, right?
No.
Yeah. Okay. So.
I can help take notes. I can't promise I'll be as good as Allison, though.
Oh, you will. You'll do it.
All right. Well, I think that is everything we have for our agenda today. So I'd entertain a motion to adjourn for the evening.
Motion.
Second.
I didn't hear who the second was. Sorry. Is it Diane?
Diane.
All right. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? You'll get kicked out when I close the meeting. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.